Hey guys. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and be honest. I went a little bit overboard with the amount of knowledge that I learned and relearned to prepare for this, but uh, I just thought this stuff was really cool, and I really loved learning about it when I was in undergrad. So I broke out all my old notes, and I'm gonna try and tell you as many cool, fun facts as I can today about mollusks, which are really strange little critters. So, what is a mollusk? Well, to begin with, they're just really, really weird. They're really ancient. They've been around a long time. There's about 1 billion of them. They're invertebrates, so they don't have a backbone, and they're very moist, damp, and squishy. That's the basics of a mollusk boiled down, but to get really into it, they're bilaterally symmetrical. So if you cut them in half laterally, both sides look the same. They're very soft and squishy, and they're protostomes, which means that when developing embryonically, the mouth develops first instead of deuterostomes, where the anus develops first. A lot of them produce a calcium carbonate shell in some form. They're the second largest phylum in Animalia. There's like 110,000 that are extant and around today, and then 20 or 30,000 in the fossil record or something like that. It's ridiculous. There's about 1 billion in one of them. They've been around since the Cambrian, so about 500 million years ago, which is incredible. Props to them. And they eat anything from dead stuff to large animals. They're just extremely variable morphologically, ecologically. Mollusks they barely really have a lot in common between taxons, to be honest with you. Most of them are marine, but snails and slugs and stuff have invaded the land. They've aggressed us. Let's talk about their bits. So they have mostly highly varied bodies, but there are like 3 general parts to a mollusk. There's the muscular foot, which they tend to use for moving about, squishing around, or anchoring themselves to like a rock in like a tide pool, for example. There's the visceral mass, which is a really intense way of saying it's got all the little organs and such on the inside. And then there's the mantle, which is the fleshy membrane that covers over both the visceral mass. It connects to the foot, and that's the part that also excretes the shell. A lot of them have shells that they can retreat into. That helps prevent them from getting desiccated and dried out. It helps protect them from predators, because like who wants to put up with that, etc. Aquatic mollusks have gills called ctenidia, and that kind of varies. Bivalves, which are like clams and things, no, they don't have a radula. They have really highly developed ctenidia that they actually use for filter feeding. And then many have a radula, which is a hard structure covered in teeth, kind of like a cat tongue, but in function, but obviously it's going to look a little bit different. It's used for like scraping things off of leaves and stuff, and things like snails. But then there are cone snails who use it for violence. They have a modified radula that they can shoot to inject things with super highly potent toxin. I'm telling you, it could kill you. Cone snails have no chill. They have a complete one-way digestive system, so they don't poop out of their mouths, essentially. It goes in one way, it comes out a different one. A lot of them have open circulatory systems where the blood's just kind of squishing around. And a hemocoel, which is sort of a cavity where the blood is going about its day in sinuses, and that's part of the hydrostatic skeleton, which helps them move around. And then when it comes to copulation, it gets weird with mollusks. Sometimes it's external, sometimes it's internal. Some of them die right after they mate. Some of them have a bajillion babies and seem to never die. Mollusks can't figure out who they want to be. So let's meet your mollusks, okay? So up on the top here, we have the cephalopods. Then we have the gastropods, the snails and such. Next we have the bivalves, which are clams and those kinds of boys. And now we're going to get into the obscure. So over here we have Polyplacophora. These are also known as chitons. Then right here we have the Selenogasters, which are a shellless kind of mollusk that produce, like, see these little fuzzies? They're called spicules instead of a shell. They do some other weird stuff, but I'm not going to get into it. They're really strange. Up here we have Caudofoveata. Those also don't have shells and they have spicules. I don't even know what's going on here. They're bizarre weirdos. Both of these guys are. Then you have Monoplacophora, but they may not even be called that anymore because taxonomy is changing. Some people say that they're like super basal and they're super closely related to sponges. Other people are like, no, I don't think so. Who knows? I don't know. Biologists can't make up their minds sometimes. We're figuring things out. They only have one shell, and they were thought to be extinct until they were dredged up in Iceland in the 1950s. So you should look into them. And then last but not least, we have these little weirdos. The scaphopods, also known as tusk shells. And if you want to learn more about any of these, just message me. I'll word vomit how cool they are, but man, we don't have time to get into these guys. My invert bio class did mollusks over a period of 3 lectures, and I doubt y'all want to do like 3 hours worth of talking about mollusks like I would love to. So, anyways, so this is what we just went over. Cephalopods are like squids, cuttlefish, octopi, and nautiloids. Gastropods are a whole bunch of weird little obscure dudes, but it includes stuff like snails and sea slugs. Bivalves are a ton of weird ones, but mussels, clams, oysters, all those guys. Chitons are cute. They got 8 little shells. And these guys, yeah, this is pretty much it. But what we're going to focus on more so in this little lecture is the cephalopods, which are an amazing group of mollusks. Now, they're all cool, but man, cephalopods are like, whoa. So cephal means head, pod means foot, so it means head foot, which makes sense because they're mostly heads with little feet sticking out of them. Don't think too much about it, it'll discomfort you. They're the only mollusks with a closed circulatory system, which is neat. The foot has actually been modified into arms, as well as tentacles, which are kind of different, on top of the siphon, which is what they use to squirt around and be about their day, as well as get rid of waste. They have really cool advanced eye structures, which are comparable to vertebrates. I think the development and evolution of eyes is just a really cool topic, so I'll touch on that a little bit later, but man, they're neat. And then they've got like super crazy smart brains, which is astounding because a lot of octopods, for example, only live to be like 2 years old. Can you imagine if they could live to be 80? Man, they would have taken over the world. But they're constantly astounding scientists with what they're able to think about and do. There's examples of like octopodes, octopi, whatever you want to call them, in aquariums, squirting water at lights that bother them, and crawling out of their tanks at night at specific times when people aren't around in order to snack on tank mates. And Finding Dory was a little bit exaggerated, but I mean they're pretty brilliant. Some of the largest invertebrates on the planet are in this group. So we're talking about colossal squid, giant squid, things that haunt mankind's nightmares ever since the first giant squids probably washed up on shores. And people were like, oh my god, I have to write mythical legends about this. And then a lot of them are simiparous, which means they die after one reproductive event. It's really depressing, actually, especially in octopi. The female will mate once, just stay by her eggs, and then waste away. Anyways, it's a bummer. I really wish they lived longer. So here are the main types of cephalopod. The nautiloids, which include the nautiluses and a bunch of weird ancient dudes who looked really strange. Octopoda, the octopuses, octopi, octopods, whatever you want to call them, doesn't matter. I don't remember what the specific term is. And then you got the decapodiforms, which are the 10-footed guys. That's the squids and the cuttlefish. So I'm a really big fan of nautiloids. I think they're absolutely precious. They're really cute. But they've also got a ton of ancestral characteristics, such as having a big old shell that they, you know, squirt around in, essentially. It's pretty neat. You know, octopi and squids and cuttlefish, they don't really have external shells, but nautiloids were like, whatever, I don't want to be naked. So the way they move around is they have a siphon, but they also pump gas into sealed chambers contained within their shell through a part of their body called the siphuncle in order to change their buoyancy. And this is important because a lot of nautiloids live like in the deep, and then they'll come up into much shallower waters at night. So they do a big a big vertical migration nightly. Plus that thing is heavy, so it's got to be able to get on with its day. They're not really simiparous. They seem to spawn seasonally, which is interesting. They have weird arms, so they're sticky, and they don't have suckers. Everyone else has suckers in this group, but they didn't get the memo. It's also got a bunch of arms. It depends on the species, I guess, but it's not like 8 or 10. It's like a bajillion. And by a bajillion, I mean like 30 or 40 or something. They have lensless, weird, primitive eyes that work like a pinhole camera, which is essentially if the pupil contracts, it gets a little bit more clarity, but it also lowers the amount of light it's getting. They're just very basic and primitive. And they're part of one of the oldest fossil groups. They have a fossil record going back 500 million years, which is ridiculous. It's so long ago. They're rad. I just really like them. Here's some pictures of them. Here's their weird primitive eye. Most of the animal is probably like right about here. The siphuncle is the only part that goes up through here, but these are all like gas chambers, so you're seeing most of the animal here. They can shut this in order to protect themselves from predators and things. And then here are their cute little arms. They're just sticky. And then here's their siphon, and they sort of just squirt around and bump into things sometimes. I don't know. They're really fun. All right. Now we have Octopoda, which have 8 arms. Octo is an 8. They don't have tentacles. Tentacles are the specific long, well, not arms, but long tentacly arm things on squids. You'll get it when we do the anatomy stuff. They don't really have fins. They don't have a shell. The only hard part of them is their beak, which means that they can fit into ridiculously tiny places for how big they are. And yeah, they don't have any problems with that. They're super wildly intelligent, really cunning predators. I've seen them pick up coconuts and hide in them to roll away from predators. I've seen them mimic predators. They just start looking up some stuff with the things that octopi do. They're crazy. And they have really cool, crazy, complex eyes with a lens, iris, and retina. The way that they distribute their nerves in the eye actually means that they don't have a blind spot like we do. So their eyes are better, but they're just really interestingly highly developed. So when an octopus is looking at you, it's definitely taking you all the way in. It's really impressive. You should look into some of the development of the eyes. It's just so cool. Most of the time they're benthic, so they're sitting around on the bottom. They tend to walk around with their arms, all doofy looking. I've seen them run on 2 arms. It looks just as dumb as you would imagine. And they're a model system for learning and memory. You can teach them a lot of things and understand their nerves. Even though they're very different from people, you can still use it to learn about how all that stuff works. So over here you have the blue ring octopus, which is a highly venomous species that lives in Australia. They're quite beautiful, I think. They're like hand-sized, but I think like 1 or 2 people have ever died from them, but you don't want to, it's very potent toxin. Over here you have the precious Dumbo octopus, which is a group called the umbrella octopuses because the webbing around their tentacles kind of spreads out like an umbrella. They're some of the deepest living inverts. They get like, I think I read like 13,000 feet down. They're real squishy and weird. And they've got these like fins that kind of look like Dumbo's ears that they use to swim around with, which is why they got the moniker the Dumbo octopus. They're quite precious, perfect in every way. You can't get better than the Dumbo octopus. And then down here you have the giant Pacific octopus, which gets like mega huge. I forgot how big, but feet upon feet across. They live off the Pacific coast, like around California and stuff. They're really intelligent. A lot of aquariums keep them. They're just really cool dudes. I'd love to see one in the wild from far away. Next up we have cuttlefish, which are sort of like mini squids. They're not squids, but they're in the same group, so they're closely related. They have a cuttle bone. It's an ossified shell. I think it not only helps with aiding in structure and muscle attachment, but it also, I think I read it has something to do with buoyancy as well. A lot of bird owners give cuttle bone to birds for like, I believe they eat it for calcium, but it's also good for sharpening beaks and gnawing away at them too. They have really weird W-shaped pupils. The shape of the pupils helps with limiting light scattering because, you know, if you're in the ocean, light levels kind of differ depending on the waves above and everything like that. So the weird W shape of the pupils actually helps kind of stabilize everything is what the most likely explanation is. I've got a video over here, hopefully it'll show, of their pupils doing their thing. So this is their normal sort of W-ish shape, and then they'll dilate wildly when it gets really dark to let in a ton of light. See how cool that is? And it becomes more of a rounded shape, which is better in low light conditions than the W shape. Plus it's way wider, so it allows more light in. Hopefully y'all saw that. Just really neat. They have really developed chromatophores, so they can change colors like crazy. Sometimes they look like little aliens. They do like waves of color over them. That's how they communicate with each other, but it also frightens predators and shows off mood and helps them hide. Really, if you could change color, you'd probably be using it for everything as well. They're just cute. So, I love how they hold their little arms, usually like this, like right underneath them. They really do look like little hovering around aliens when you see them. They just sort of like float in the water column, very stable and hover about in their strange ways. But they're really neat animals. Last but not least, we'll get into the squids. So I'm not going to go super in depth like the dissection stuff is, because I mean you're about to get all that anyways. But let's talk about them. So they've got 8 short arms, which are, you know, the little bits in front of their mouths, and then they've got 2 long tentacles. Those are the really long. That was all pretty self-descriptive. Those are different anatomically. Arms and tentacles are different. So you'll see it when you're doing the dissection stuff. They're super voracious predators. They kind of terrify me when they get really big. They swim ridiculously quickly. They often swim in schools. I think that's what it's called when there's a group of them. I don't know if they have their own specific word, like crows. A group of crows is a murder. But and they'll attack prey all together. which gets terrifying when you get up into sizes like the Humboldt squid, which are like 5-6 feet long. So, like, octopi tend to be very solitary. A lot of squid tend to be more social in that aspect, which is interesting. They live everywhere from like the open ocean to the deepest depths of the ocean. They get really, really deep down there. Their shell is reduced to a pin, which you'll see in the dissection stuff. It's for like muscle attachment, as well as it functions somewhat like a backbone in terms of giving it structure. It's not a backbone. They're still invertebrates, but they're sort of cheating, to be honest with you. And they can be super massive, like the giant squid is like, God, what was it, like 40, 60 feet long? I don't remember. And then they can be real teeny tiny, like inches. They have the biggest eyes in the animal kingdom, which is a frightening concept. So they get as big as dinner plates in the larger squids. So they'll see ya. And then they communicate by changing colors, and they flash colors too. I mean, like they get real bright. Some of them have, they can phosphoresce, I believe is the correct word as well, so they can kind of glow. Up here is pictures of the only video we have of a giant squid. We might have one more video, but this is the first video that came out. It was really, really cool. You should definitely look that up. Here's a generic random squid that kind of frightened me. You can see the little chromatophores and everything like that. And then here's a Humboldt squid. Look how big it gets. Now imagine a huge school of like hundreds of them. Yeah, that's a thing. That happens. I like squid, but Humboldt squid particularly frightened me for some reason. Some sort of a primal fear I should probably get over. But squids are really neat. I mean, you've got the biggest invertebrates around up here. They fight whales, like sperm whales, hunt squid, giant squid. We found gigantic scarring on sperm whales now. As well as huge beaks in their stomachs that seem to be bigger than anything we've seen. So I can't wait for what the next decade turns up in terms of big old deep sea fellas, because deep sea animals are some of the coolest ones around by far to me. They're so unique. They're so interesting. I believe Planet Earth has a wonderful episode on deep sea critters if you want to watch more about that kind of stuff, but man, they're neat. And that's pretty much that. I can go more in depth on any group you want if you want to just message me. The stuff's really neat. I love talking about it. I'm not much of a mammal gal, but inverts are really neat. So anyways, that's pretty much that. Please enjoy learning further about mollusks in the squid activities, and I'll hopefully see y'all soon.